And I don't even know if one can do this, but is there a way that you could even maybe boil down some of the thread of what you're talking about into like if it was the John Cariani guide of like what to focus on and what not to focus on when you're getting ready to put Almost Maine on stage? Like, what would you say would be a couple of your, I guess, call them tips, or like, here's what you can really focus on, and here's some stuff you can just forget about because that stuff is just background and color and doesn't matter as much.
I guess what I like to tell people is, what would you actually do if the things that are happening to the people in Almost Maine happened to you? And you might be skeptical and you might be very wary, and you can be all those things, but you also have to like go into the difficulty and go into the weirdness. And I think a lot of times in life, if we encounter weirdness sometimes or difference, sometimes we pull away. And in plays, you have to go into that difficulty and weirdness so that there's drama for the audience to experience. So that's what I say. And instead, lots of people always say, well, the character does this and the character does that. And I don't understand actors who talk that way. It's just like, what you're playing the character. So what are you doing? What are you doing right now in this moment? What are you doing? Not what is the character doing? Don't separate you from the character. Be the character and it's you.
Yeah, I love that. Well, you said this a couple times, and actually, when you said it, it rang a bell because I heard you talking about it in another interview. But you were talking about in another interview, you phrased it like we don't pay attention to like the drama of goodness and joy, and this much in theater. And I don't know if it, like when you say that, and that interview happened a while back, so I wonder if even you would have some fresh thoughts about that now that you're doing new work. But what do you feel about that? About the importance of having theater that brings those kind of values onto stage?
Well, I think that, everything's the flip side of everything else. And I think lousy things and good things happen in equal measure. I was actually hanging out with my aunt recently, and I was talking about how hard things were and how frustrated I was, and how it feels like things aren't just going well. And I'm expecting things to go a certain way because of the mindset I was in. I was just expecting everything to kind of go the way I don't want it to go. And she finally just said, you know what? There's just as much likelihood that things could go the way you want them to. And I was like, oh, she said, yeah, you got to give as much space for that stuff, as you do to the stuff going the way you don't want it to go. And I know that, you know what I mean? I tell people that, I tell my friends that, but to hear somebody say it, you have to make as much space for the other. And I feel like musicals make a lot of room for comedy. Musicals make a lot of room for joy and happiness. I don't think plays do. And I think a lot of it is because academics kind of control what's being made in the theater right now. And I have nothing against academics, but I don't think academics are very funny. And I think people who work in the theater, there are a lot of really funny comedians who work in the theater. We know how to make things funny live. I think the theater needs to trust its workers a little bit more. And by workers, I mean its actors. And I think that I often tell people, like, it's a lot harder to be happy on stage as somebody who plays quite a few happy people. It's harder to play happy than sad. Sad's pretty easy because I'm generally a fairly sad person. There's a lot of sadness in life, especially as a middle-aged guy. Things get sad. You deal with a lot of losses. I'm 53 now, and I'm dealing with loss at pretty rapid fire, and it's pretty intense. So there's a lot of sadness, and it's easy to be sad on stage because a lot of days I'm pretty sad. What's hard is when you have to play a happy person and you're having a really tough day, and you have to like generate joy. Because falsely generated joy on stage is the worst thing in the world. And that's why a lot of people think that they don't like comedies and they don't like musicals that are joyful because they feel like the joy is pushed or forced. I think there's nothing better than true, honest, really realized joy on stage. It's truly awesome and infectious. And I think it's hard to generate because it's physically demanding and it requires a total mindset shift. But that's kind of my take on that,
And obviously, as a playwright, that's something that you can sort of pull into it from the very beginning, that helps give the actors who are going to eventually play that a head start. I mean, the lines are there.
Yeah. And also, like, I really adhere to this idea that I think one of F. Scott Fitzgerald's characters say it, and I can't remember which novel, but the sentimental person thinks that everything is going to last and work out just fine. And the romantic person has a desperate confidence that everything is going to fall apart and go to hell. And I think if most of us are romantics, because I think most of us expect things as we get older to not quite go the way we planned because we had a lot of experience with things not going the way we planned.
Yeah.
I think that's a good one to live by if you're playing a happy person. If there's that underlying dread, I think it makes the happy that much more tenuous and interesting.
Yeah.